Hey, you guys, welcome back to the salon. Gonna kind of do something a little bit strange. I don't know if it's a strange or anything like that, but I've been wanting to talk about this weird, creepy, crazy cartoon that I saw like when I was a kid and that a lot of people maybe haven't seen. And I also wanted to get a little bit into why certain things like scared me as a kid. And, I don't know if I have any easy answers about that, but it was just kind of like an interesting thing that I wanted to get into like in regards to this cartoon in particular. So, as most people who have children or were once children will probably know, kids are afraid of inexplicable things sometimes, depending on, you never really know. Like, yeah, they're scared of scary things, but sometimes they're scared of like really innocuous things, like what seems innocuous to adults. It's hard for an adult to like cast their mindset back into a kid's mindset and say, like, what on earth could it possibly be that is like scaring the kid like that? Like, for example, when I was a really little kid, I was basically terrified by that bubbling cauldron sound effect, like at the beginning of the song The Monster Mash. To this day, I have no idea why that is. Like, I have no idea what about that was scary to me. The song itself was not scary, and actually I quite liked it. But for whatever reason, like when I heard that bubbling cauldron, I had to like run out of the room and like put my hands over my ears and then like wait, and somebody had to tell me that it was over, and then I could come back and like listen to the rest of the song, because we used to have like a little like 45 of it. I still have no idea like why that scared me so much, but that's kind of like what I'm talking about. I can't cast my mind back to little kid me and be like, what the fuck are you even thinking? Like, why were you scared of a bubbling cauldron sound effect, but not the rest of the song? Similarly, like along those same lines, I also have pretty vivid memories of this really big paper mache dragon mask that my uncle made sometime in the late 1970s, I want to say. Now, he kept it in his bedroom, like upstairs at my grandfather's old house, which was like this really huge, dark, mysterious kind of house. Which actually I still kind of like dream about sometimes, and I've set like some of my stories there and stuff because it, it made a lot of a big impression on me. That house did. So, but the thing about this mask was that when it was in the house, like in his upstairs bedroom, I absolutely like refused to even go upstairs when it was there, because I kind of felt like it was maybe watching me, with the blank eye holes, because he had it. It was designed to like go over your entire head. And it was actually like beautifully done, and it was just kind of covered with glitter and things like that. And I don't know, I just like something about it really, really scared me, and I always had to like have somebody take me upstairs like while it was in the house. My cousin actually inherited it like years later. I don't know if he still got it or not. Probably not, because that was like a long time ago. Looking back at it now, like I said, it was a gorgeous like piece of art, but I don't know why that scared me. I was never particularly scared of dragons or anything like that, but that really like scared the crap out of me too. And the thing about it too is that that mask made such an impression on me that I actually wrote a short story called Heartworms that was sort of like based on it. And, all the stuff in there about the mask is absolutely true. And that's actually in my book, The Associated Villainies, which actually first came out in 2011, but then I did a second edition a couple years back. On the other hand, though, when I was a little kid, I really, really liked scary kids entertainment. Like, I started reading like grown-up horror, like Edgar Allan Poe stories and stuff like that at a pretty young age too. But honestly, like, if any regular show that I watched or cartoon or something like that, if they had like a Halloween episode or like a scary episode or something like that, I was all about it. So I really, really always liked scary things. And the thing about, I'm not so sure about nowadays, because I don't really keep up with children's entertainment because I don't have any kids of my own. But I kind of feel like, particularly in the 60s and or the 70s and 80s rather, I kind of feel like a lot of ostensibly children's entertainment was kind of seemed like purposely made to be just kind of straight up nightmare fuel. And I guess that has a long tradition. I mean, shit, you can go all the way back to like Grimm's fairy tales, which were a lot more gruesome than anything you'd see nowadays. And those were, ostensibly to be told to children, like as morality tales and stuff. I mean, even as recently, and it's not that recent, but stuff like Coraline, like the Neil Gaiman book and movie, and the Harry Potter series and stuff like that, which are, meant for kids, older kids, true, but, there's pretty scary stuff in there as well. I don't want to speak for all kids. Like, when I was a kid, I really, really loved to be scared, and I know that a lot of other kids are too. Like I said, all kids are different, like, so I'm sure that some of them don't enjoy it in the slightest, but me and a lot of kids I knew absolutely really, really did like to be scared, even though, it would give us nightmares and we wouldn't be able to sleep. Oh my God, there's something in the closet, but it was a good scared. Like, I really did like that sensation. When I was little, I probably, because my parents were pretty permissive as far as that went. So I kind of like rented sort of maybe age inappropriate, horror films, or watch them on cable, or, I would go to the library and like check out like Alfred Hitchcock, horror anthologies, which are meant for adults, and, just scary books. I liked really, really scary books. So if I could get my sticky fingers on it and it was scary, then I was going to have it and enjoy it. The thing about it though is that when you read see or read your childhood terrors again as an adult, I don't know, it's kind of like a weird mixed reaction. I feel like you're almost sort of shocked that kids turn out as relatively normal as they do. Like when you're, because when you see some of the stuff that like I watched growing up, I'm like, wow, that was pretty fucked up. I'm surprised I turned out, I'm just like, not saying I turned out normal because I didn't, but turned out okay, you know what I mean? Like fairly well adjusted. And then sometimes I'd be like, geez, why did my parents let me watch this? I was thinking about it the other day because me and my sister went to Disney the other day, and we went on the Haunted Mansion because that's obviously the best ride at Disney World. And there was a little kid with the family in front of us. He was probably, I imagine he was like 4. He looked like he was about 4 years old. And as soon as you go in that first room and they kind of do the introduction and everything like that, kid was not having it. I mean, he was screaming his head off. And just like, he was just like, no, no, no. And like, they had to kind of like drag him in. Like, he just did not want to do it. And pretty much like through the entire ride, because I think they were like a couple doom buggies like ahead of us, you could just hear him screaming like almost the whole way through the thing. And my sister was like, well, that makes it better, I think, like when you hear all the little kids screaming. He was all right when he came out because we saw him come out, but I was trying to think about it from that point of view, like from a 4-year-old's point of view, and I said, if you're 4 years old and you're kind of like, you don't like being scared and stuff like that, then the Haunted Mansion would be like pretty terrifying. Like to an adult, it's not really all that scary, but if you're a little kid, I could see that being like really, really scary to a little kid. So I didn't really blame the kid. I just thought it was like really funny that he was like freaking out like that. But I mean, and I was also thinking of like stuff that I watched when I was like a really little kid, or maybe like a slightly older kid that, scared me, but I loved it, you know what I mean? And it just kind of like stuck in my brain, like after all this time, like the witch's transformation scene, like in the Disney version of Snow White, which is pretty terrifying. The Heffalumps and Woozles from the Winnie the Pooh thing. Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day, I think that is. Or like Night on Bald Mountain from Fantasia, which has like big demon and ghosts and shit like that, which is awesome. Also like stuff that came out in the 80s, like when I was slightly older, like The Dark Crystal, which had like Agra. She was kind of like that fucking ogre witch kind of lady, and like the Skeksis, they were like really, really scary. And one that I remember in particular like really liking was Fraggle Rock, if you guys remember that. It was a Jim Henson show, and they had one episode that was like the scary episode, and it was called Wembley and the Terrible Tunnel. And for some reason that stuck with me. Like I don't remember how old I was when I first saw it, but yeah, that stuck with me as well because I liked anything scary like that. So when you kind of like stop to think about it, a rather large amount, a probably pretty startling amount of children's entertainment, at least from my era, like I said, I can't speak to nowadays because I don't, watch a lot of children's entertainment, is pretty like chock full of horrors, right? I mean, another thing that I was a little bit older when I saw this, but this freaked my little brother out like a lot. We went to see Who Framed Roger Rabbit at the theater, and that part where the little cartoon shoe like gets put into the dip and like dissolved by the judge or whatever, my brother, like he was still in diapers, I think, he jumped out his little chair or jumped out my mom's lap and just ran up. He's like, nope, not having that. He just like ran up. My mom had to like chase him out the theater. But like I said, that was like pretty, because I was pretty stressed out by that too. I'm like, oh my God, that's horrible. Like, why would they show that to a little kid? Like this poor little shoe going, no, don't kill me. And I was just like, holy shit, that's fucked up. There's also that like nightmare scene from like The Brave Little Toaster, the boat ride from the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, like with the chicken with its head getting cut off and the centipede and all that kind of crazy shit. Then there's like Watership Down, which holy crap, I think that traumatized like our whole generation, I feel like. I mean, I don't really have any definitive theories as to why a lot of writers and filmmakers go so dark sometimes with matter that is supposedly, meant to be aimed toward children. I think maybe, and this could be, I could be totally talking out my ass about this, I'm not really sure, but maybe it's just because as creative people, they remember maybe a little bit better the way that everything feels like really new and really real to you when you're a kid. And scary things seem like 10 to 100 times scarier, and they tend to stick with you in a way that that things really don't as you get older. I mean, adult filmmakers obviously know that they're terrifying the pants off of the little Rugrats or whatever, but I don't think, like, yeah, you could come at it as like, oh, they're just being sadistic and like just wanting to scare the crap out of little kids, which maybe is part of it because, you know, it's fun, you know what I mean? But I don't think that's the entire reason. I don't think it's just like some sadistic glee that they're going with there. I think it's actually at least in my opinion, I think it's a tremendous gesture of respect toward children, but kind of a way to say, I know what I'm putting on the screen, I know what I'm putting in front of you is really scary, much scarier than it would be if you were a grown-up, but I also think that you're strong enough to handle it. So that's why I kind of like a lot of scary, like entertainments that are aimed toward children that are really scary. So there were a whole bunch of cartoons that left a big, like, indelible imprint on my young and fragile psyche, if you want to put it that way. But I wanted to talk about this particular one because for many years, one, it's weird as fuck, but two, for a long time, I thought I had maybe imagined it. So I remember seeing this several times on some pay channel, HBO, Cinemax, something like that. We had a lot of them back in the 70s because my dad worked for the cable company, so we got all of the pay channels for free. So I think I saw this somewhere around 1978, 1979, something like that, when I would have been maybe 6, 7 years old. So I saw it a bunch of times then because it seemed like it was always on. But then I didn't see it again for like a really long time, like decades at least. Every now and then, like, I'd have like a memory of a scene and it would sort of like drift through my consciousness or whatever. And whoever I happened to be with at the time, I'm like, hey, do you remember this like really weird cartoon? And it was like, came out in the 70s. And I would explain it, like describe it to them. And they would look at me like I had, you know, underwear on my head or whatever. They never knew what I was talking about. So after a time, I was like, well, maybe maybe the whole thing was just a fever dream. Like maybe it was a nightmare that I had. And I just like, you know, conflated it with reality somehow of like something that I actually saw. But then came the advent of the internet, the miracle of the modern age, and I was able to finally confirm that, yes, this was a real animated movie that actually people made and it actually happened. And yes, of course, now you can watch the entire thing for free on YouTube if you would like to do that. So this was Jack and the Beanstalk, although in its original, it's a Japanese, in its original title, it was, and I'm sure I'm butchering this like really, really bad, but I think it was called Jaku to Mame no Ki or something like that. So this actually came out in 1974. And what it was a Japanese attempt at replicating a more Western Disney-style musical animated film rather than the more, you know, traditionally Japanese animated films they'd had. They wanted to do something that was more like a Disney film. So it was actually directed by a guy named Gisaburo Sugii. Not really sure how to pronounce that, so I apologize. And was, of course, based on the well-known fairy tale, though because it was Japanese, it seemed like they almost couldn't help themselves. It's like they had to make it weird just because. They couldn't just do a straight-up adaptation of Jack and the Beanstalk, like the classic Jack and the Beanstalks. It is that, but it has like all these bizarro details that, you know, I don't even know where they got them from. So you have this kind of like standard fairy tale opener, just like the, you know, the normal Grimm's fairy tale of Jack buying some magic beans and climbing up the beanstalk. Now you do get a little bit of weirdness at first because I think like he actually is lured up or is convinced to like go up the beanstalk by a talking mouse. So there's that. We'll get into that in a little bit. You know, and yes, there is a giant involved at some point, but right here is where things get kind of weird. So the first person, like other than the talking mouse, that Jack meets when he gets into like this kingdom, this castle in the clouds, essentially, like at the top of the beanstalk, is this character named Princess Margaret. And she, like in a lot of anime characters, she has like the big eyes and everything like that. And she has like this little short, like pixie hair, but it's like pointy at the top. When he meets her, she seems ever so slightly out of it. Like she just seems like, yeah, man, whoa. She's like that kind of thing, you know, like not like a hippie necessarily, but She seems like she's on something. You know what I mean? She's just kind of like very wispy, very serene. She kind of floats around on little cloud puffs. She's got like all these little clouds, and she's just like shoo, shoo, like floating around like that. And just kind of humming contentedly to herself as she's just floating around like she does. So she takes Jack into this seemingly deserted castle that's here in the clouds and shows him this terrifying like portrait up on the wall of this glowering, hulking brute. Now this individual's name is Tulip, and she's gonna be marrying him the next day, she says. And she is like super, super happy about this. She's just like blissful, going, I'm going to be marrying him tomorrow. He's so awesome. Look at it. And Jack's like, what the fuck? Like, it just looks like this really, it looks like a monster, like pretty much. Yeah, she's just like swirling around the castle, like talking about how awesome it is that she's going to be marrying this like clearly very scary monster who is like a giant. And of course, Jack, as you would be, is like really, really wigged out by this whole situation. Now, as if that wasn't weird enough, that whole thing, you also get introduced to the giant's mother, who is this evil queen, Maleficent, Cruella de Vil sort of character. And her name is Madame Hecuba. She has a really, really scrawny, like terrifying face. She has these really, really big, like evil eyes. And she has this really, really creepy as fuck, like old hag voice. Like, she's pretty terrifying. She can also move things around just by waving her hands. So she's got like fucking magic powers, right? Now, at first, she seems pretty hospitable. She's a little bit menacing, obviously, because of the way she looks and the way she talks and stuff. But she seems like she's trying to be nice. So Madame Hecuba sends Margaret, the princess, off to kind of, she says, go fix your makeup. Now, we find out later on what that means is that the witch is actually like using a drug that comes out of like a powder compact to control Margaret. And she's controlling her. She wants her to marry Tulip, who is her son. And then she'll be queen and she'll rule over the land of the clouds and yada yada. So she's like, it's this whole like plot where she's trying to take over. You know what I mean? So she takes Jack to the dining hall, and they walk through this like really, really creepy. I mean, the castle like looks really cool. Like, it's all the pattern, like the floors have all these like weird patterns, like checkered patterns and stuff, and it's like really creepy. And so, and like all the hallways are like really dark and really cavernous and shit like that. So that was already like kind of creeping me out. And like the character of Madame Hecuba is kind of creepy too. So then they get into this elevator that takes them up to this really, really long, like really, really eerie like dining room. And the witch gives Jack some soup that actually like knocks him out. Like, she roofies his ass, right? And then she puts him in a pot and she's gonna eat him later. So she's basically like gloating the whole time. Oh my God, it's been 20 long years since I've been able to like feast on human flesh. And she's gonna like eat him. So she puts him in the pot, like sleep in it. I'm just like, okay, this is a little bit messed up. One scene in particular that I would like to focus on largely because this one like freaked me out so much when I was a kid, and it's still kind of freaky now, like as an adult. Maybe not so if you didn't see it when you were a kid, but it still like brings back memories like that. So the scene toward the end where they do like this wedding scene between Tulip and Margaret, and it's really like trippy and disturbing in a way that I couldn't really articulate when I was a kid, but like now I'm just like looking at it going, holy crap, like yeah, that's messed up. So we see Tulip, who is kind of this really big, he's a giant obviously, so he's this just big stupid ape-like, he doesn't really talk, he kind of grunts, I guess he kind of talks, but not like, he's not like articulate or anything. So he just looks like a big like gorilla kind of, and he's getting into his wedding clothes. And then we cut to Madame Hecuba, his mom, and she's very industriously like cutting something or other out of sheets of white paper, like these big sheets of white paper, like you don't know what they are yet. Now there's also like a shot of Margaret in her wedding dress, and she's sitting in front of the mirror in her room, and she's totally spaced out, and she's like not moving. She's just sitting there going, oh yay, you know what I mean? So you know, like by this point you know she's like all drugged up, which like I said, this is like several layers of fucked up, this adaptation. So then like in the next shot you see that Madame Hecuba has actually been cutting out, what she's been cutting out of the paper was these life-sized and kind of square-headed people that are like paper people, and they only have like slits for eyes or like little triangles for eyes and no other facial features. So she has them all like draped over her arm, and then she goes into like the wedding chapel or whatever, and she's like draping them over the pews in the chapel, you know what I mean? And while she's doing that, she's singing this really, really weird song that has all of this witchy cackling and lyrics about how she can't stop laughing because her horrible plan is like finally coming to fruition. Like I said, her whole plan being she's going to get Princess Margaret, who is ostensibly the ruler of this kingdom, even though it doesn't seem like there's hardly anybody else around, but we find out what happened with that later. But she's like, if Margaret marries my son, then I'm going to be the de facto leader, because she's planning to kill the princess and then take over. So there's that whole thing. So Tulip kind of like lumbers into the chapel, right, in his ridiculous suit. And then Hecuba like raises her arms, and all the paper people like stand up, like she animated them all like through magic, which, like I said, kind of creeped me out when I was a kid. So it's like reverse dominoes. They're just all like stand up like that, and I was like, oh. And then she like spreads her arms out again, and all the paper people like sit down like they're at a wedding, you know what I mean? Like they're the guests at a wedding. So she like brought them to life. So the witch goes to Margaret's quarters, like her little room. Now Margaret stands up when she enters, like almost like on cue, like I said, because she's drugged. So it's almost like the witch is like controlling her. And she doesn't like look at anybody. She doesn't talk. She's just like all spaced out or whatever. And Hecuba is like, oh, your bridegroom is waiting, and then like all the guests are there, and don't keep everyone waiting. So Margaret, who's totally drugged to the gills, she just follows the witch out of this big like open air room, and she doesn't say anything. And then there's all this sounds of like wedding bells from the tower, but it actually sounds like it sounds like a funeral more than a wedding, really. It's like kind of creepy. Now Jack and his dog have found the treasure room. There's this big like room of treasure in the bottom of the castle, and there's all these mice, because remember how I said there was a talking mouse at the beginning that was wearing a dress that came down the beanstalk at first? Okay, so there are a bunch of other mice in here that can talk, and they also all have clothes on. And at this point, all the mice are like crying and everything. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe the wedding is going through or whatever. And Jack finds out that these actually used to be all the people that lived in the castle, like all the, the other courtiers and all that other kind of stuff. But Hecuba turned them all into mice. So they're obviously like not real happy about it. So Jack basically, after he finds out all this information, and they're like, you really have to save Margaret. Oh my God, like we want to be turned back into people or whatever. So, because Jack was just going to say, fuck it, just going to take some treasure and get the fuck out. But, he is eventually like guilted into like fixing shit. So he there's also a talking harp for some reason. I can't remember. I don't think the harp used to be a person. Not that I remember anyway. I think only the mice used to be, so I don't know why the harp talks particularly. I can't remember. But basically Jack threatens the harp with an axe, like to get him to say like, how do we break the spell like over Margaret? Now the thing about it is that Margaret is like all drugged up with the compact, but the spell has to be renewed every day. So like if Hecuba doesn't do like the powder thing, then it'll wear off. The harp also tells Jack that the spell can be broken like completely if Margaret gets a kiss from a brave man. So I mean, it's a very standard like fairy tale kiss from a guy type of thing. So then we kind of hear like the funeral bells again, wedding bells, and then there's this really creepy like green tinted shot of Tulip like walking down the aisle with a really, really tiny and obviously drugged as shit Margaret like riding on his arm, which, yeah, they're gonna get married. This is messed up. It's messed up. So then there's like a priest who is also like a paper person, like the ones that Hecuba was cutting out before, but actually he has a mouth, the other ones don't. But the mouth that he has looks like a pulsating butthole, which is like also all kind of disturbing. And he starts singing this really unsettling wedding song that almost like reminded me of like Klaus Nomi for a second. Maybe that's just me, but it just kind of sounded like that, as kind of like, Tulip and Margaret like come up to the thing. And Hecuba is she's like not even hiding the fact that she just can't wait for this shit to be. She's like back in the back, like rubbing her hands together and cackling and shit like that, like yes, yes, blah blah blah, like, and everything in here is like all fucking sickly green. And then Margaret like slides off the giant's arm, and you see that she only comes up to his crotch, which is totally gross. So there's that. You know, and the priest is singing this weird song with his little butthole mouth like pulsating, and it's like super creepy. And then like all the paper people in the pews stand up, and there's panning shot across all these empty triangular little eye holes. Like I said, they don't have any mouths or anything. And then like the screen goes red, and then we see what we presume to be like Hecuba's fantasy, like what's going to happen like after the wedding takes place. She's dressed up like a queen, and then she uses her wand to turn Tulip into a rat. So not only is she going to get rid of Margaret, but she's also going to get rid of her son as well, what I presume is her son with the giant. And then after that, like you see the screen go yellow, and then you see what is presumably Tulip's fantasy, which is him and Margaret like swinging on this big wedding bell, like a big huge wedding bell. And then there's the thing, like I said, the priest is still he's singing from like this little Bible, but it's like a little Bible like that's made of like just a little folded piece of paper, and he's like singing, and all of the paper people in the pews are like start swaying back and forth, and everything is like kind of green and like seasick looking. It's just like, it's so creepy. And like Hecuba has this telepathic like voice in her head, and she's saying to Margaret, she's like, say that you love him, say that you love him. It's like all that kind of shit, and it's just really psychedelic and like really unsettling. And it kind of still, not gonna lie, it does actually kind of like freak me out. I'm like, I can't believe I watched this when I was like a little kid, because that's like really, it's very trippy, like in the way that a lot of 70s cartoons were, even in the United States. But this one has the added thing of being like a little bit more like quote unquote alien, at least to somebody that grew up in the West, because it was Japanese. So it was just kind of like, so I couldn't quite put my finger on like why it was so weird or why it was so creepy, because it was kind of like a Disney movie, but not really. And I couldn't really articulate like why that was. Yeah, so basically like Jack gets there, you know, in the nick of time, and like is able to kiss Margaret and break the spell and everything like that. And then there's like a big chase scene where like Tulip is chasing him like all through the chasm, like wrecking the castle, like because he's so huge and everything like that. Oh, and did I also mention that and I have no idea where this came from or why this is a thing, but like after this whole, like after Jack comes in and interrupts the wedding and like tries to save the day and everything, suddenly Hecuba has fangs. Also, Tulip can like Hulk out to 10 times his size, which was he was already a giant, but now he's like a giant. So he like hulks out, and like all his clothes come off, except he still has a pair of boxer shorts on that have hearts all over them. So there's that. And that when Tulip finally gets, because Hecuba is like freaking out, like, you need to catch that kid and we need to finish the ceremony, blah, blah, blah. And she's like yelling at him and everything. And then Tulip finally gets sick of Hecuba's shit and steps on her. And then when he pulls his foot away, she's mechanical. Like, she's a mechanical witch. So I'm not really sure who built her or how she has a son who's a giant, who is presumably an organic being. But she's like, I don't know if this was just because Japan and they really liked robots, and they thought, well, it's a kid's cartoon, so we have to have a robot in there somewhere. Let's just make the witch a robot, just because, like, for reasons. I couldn't figure it out. It confused me so much when I was a kid that like the giant was like squish, and I was like, holy shit, like the giant just stepped on the witch, and then he pulled, and I was like, wait, what? I was like, what the fuck? Why is she a robot? I didn't get it, but she's like mechanical. But I was like, that's the weirdest thing ever. Oh my god. So Japan, we do love you. We do love you. But this is like so bizarre, so bizarre. But I have to say that, I mean, even as an adult, I still adore this cartoon. I have to say that the animation is pretty shoddy, like even for the time. And some of the dubbing I don't love. Although mostly it's just like the voice, whoever did the voice for Jack, I don't really like that. It was like very goofball. Like the rest of it was okay. I didn't mind it. But you know, that happens with a lot of Japanese imports, so I'm not going to shit on it too hard for that. But there's just kind of something about the whole eerie atmosphere of it that still kind of like gives me a little bit of, you know what I mean? Just because it's so weird. It's so weird. When I originally saw it, like when I was a little kid, when I was maybe 7 or whatever, I had no idea that it was a Japanese film because it was dubbed into English. And I didn't know, this was the late 70s. I had no idea. I had no concept of anime or anything like that. So it didn't even occur to me that this cartoon came from another country and was just dubbed into English because it was a cartoon, you know what I mean? And it was on all the time. So I didn't even really think about it. So maybe that's what contributed, like I said earlier, to the whole otherworldly vibe it gave me, that when I was a kid, like it was kind of like off-putting, but it was also like really alluring at the same time in a way that I couldn't like put my finger on. And that's probably what it was, that I didn't know that it was Japanese. I have to say too, like the music in this is also like weirdly great. It's all like it's weird because like I read some contemporary reviews of it and they were just like, oh, the songs aren't good or aren't memorable. I'm like, what the fuck? It's like I still remember those songs like from all that time ago. Like the songs are like totally bizarre and totally great. It just, the whole thing just has such an early 70s like acid trip kind of shit. Like, a lot of cartoons and a lot of kids shows back then. I mean, shit, man, look at stuff from the 60s and 70s, like HR Puffin stuff and all that kind of stuff, like had that real acid trip. You could tell that like people that dropped acid like made those, you know what I mean? I don't know if that's the case here, but I don't know. There's something weird was going on with this because, like I said, I don't know what the deal is with the mechanical witch. I don't know what the deal is with the boxer shorts. I don't know what the deal is with like the weird, the whole princess being drugged and all of that kind of. It's just like bizarre, but in a really, really good way. And I kind of feel like I don't even know if you can buy it. I mean, I think you can now, but for a long time, like it wasn't available. It just seemed like it got, I'm sure that like HBO or Cinemax or whoever showed it probably got it for super cheap and just showed it a lot of times because I saw it a bunch of times, but I feel like it wasn't really, not that I saw like was available like to buy or anything like that, but like I said, it probably is now. I think you can still watch it on YouTube for free. I don't know if I'm like allowed to say that or not, but I mean, when I checked like the day before I recorded this, it looked like a couple people had uploaded it. So I'd be interested to see like, so y'all, if you haven't seen it, like go watch it and like tell me what you think. Like I said, maybe the impact of it isn't going to be the same for somebody that didn't see it as a kid, because I saw it as a kid and I was like, what the fuck? But it's like, but I really, really loved it at the same time. And it really made a big impression because it kind of scared me, but I couldn't really put my finger on why it scared me. And then, like, I think something that contributed too was that I didn't see it for a long time and I kept talking about it with people and they didn't know what I was talking about. So for a long time, I thought maybe that I had just made it up or that it was a nightmare that I had and like had somehow like turned into a movie in my mind. So I think that maybe contributed to its mystique a little bit as well. But I kind of feel like a lot of people haven't seen it. So if you have seen it and you know what I'm talking about, then please like let me know, because I want to like kind of like compare notes on this shit if you thought it was weird too, like when you saw it as a kid. But yeah, so yeah, this has been like a really fun discussion and hopefully you guys enjoyed it too. Please tell me in the comments what scared you in particular as a kid. Was it something that is like really dumb and not scary at all, like my whole thing was with the bubbling cauldron sound, which like I said, I still have no idea why that scared me, but I love hearing stuff like that just because it's just so random. So if you have anything like that, let me know in the comments. And thank you as always for dropping by the salon today and watching this content. If you like this content, please like and share, and also subscribe to the Scare Salon if you haven't already. Also, you might want to check out my website, which is scaresalon.com, and I have like a bunch of other written content over there, book reviews, movie reviews, all that kind of stuff, and I put new stuff up every day. On this channel, I put 2 videos up a week that are usually just mostly about old stuff, but I talk about new stuff too, mostly movies, but also some books as well. I'll see you guys again on the next one. Bye.